My friends, let us talk about the latest chapter in the Dana White Francis Ngannou feud. You guys ready for this? Is everyone ready for this? Pull up the popcorn, grab a chair, maybe a blankie.
Who, me?
A nice drink, a coffee, a tea, a peppermint tea, might I suggest. Let's get into this because on Thursday, my friends, I come home and I see a bunch of clips from a press conference. Didn't think that there would be a press conference on Thursday evening. I believe it was Thursday evening. It was more like Thursday afternoon, and I saw it Thursday evening. But there was a power slap event, and Dana White met with the media at this power slap event, after this power slap event in Abu Dhabi to talk about a whole host of things. And this was his first time meeting with the media since Francis beat Renan Ferreira last Saturday in Riyadh. We wondered if he would show up at the post-fight press conference at the Apex event, which happened shortly after the PFL pay-per-view. That was the Fluffy Hernandez-Michel Pereira fight, but there was no post-fight press conference with Dana White. So this was his first time. And so much has been said since, but there were, in particular, three clips that I wanted to play for everyone. And I wanted to react to them and try to explain why so much nonsense, so much BS was spewed. And I don't think this is going to be the final chapter. I really don't. But I do think it's important to debunk some of these things because as time goes on, you could spin a narrative any which way you want. It is important because so much is available. There are so many clips and receipts and moments and press conferences and interviews available to us. It's actually quite easy to do so. I know there's a lot of new fans, and so I feel like we are doing you all a great service by providing this. And so you may watch these current press conferences and clips and interviews and say, oh, of course this is the way it is. Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, let us break it all down and you make sense of it. How about that? And so let us begin this journey, this deep dive, if you will. Starting off this Thursday at this press conference, MMA Fighting's Jose Youngs asks Dana White his opinion on what Francis Ngannou did in his PFL debut. Take a look.
Francis is all about the money. Francis left because he knew that if he fought Jon Jones and didn't win, it would hurt his chances of making the money that he wanted to make. But realistically, his deal was bigger here.
Okay, let's pause it right there. So right off the jump, it's Francis is all about the money. Francis is all about the money, right? That's what he says, which is an unbelievable thing to say about a prize fighter. Every prize fighter should always be about the money. That's what they're programmed to think. It's all about the money. They are literally prize fighters. Yeah, belts are nice, pay-per-views are nice, but it all comes down to how much money you make. And for someone who is a multi-millionaire who came from being a bellboy at the Boston Harbor Hotel to the position he's in now, to put down a person, an individual who came from the sand mines of Cameroon, who was making $1 a day as a youngster, digging ditches, who's had to survive so much just to get to this point. And we've gone through what he's had to escape and being in prison and living in a parking garage and going through the ocean and all that stuff. To say that guy is just all about the money, to just paint him with that brush, even if that was truly the case, even if he didn't tell us 30,000 times that it wasn't just about the money, who would rip him for that? Who would disagree with that stance? If he came from $1 a day as a kid digging ditches in sand mines, if he truly was all about the money, just like every other pro athlete on the planet trying to maximize their earnings, their worth, their potential, how is that a knock? How is that a shot on a prize fighter to say that he is all about the money? You then hear him say he's all about the money. Literally 10 seconds later, he says, but the deal we offered him was more. The deal he turned down, he should have said the deals, because there were multiple, probably 5+ towards the end. Who knows how many different iterations. We can end this whole clip right now. In one breath, you say this man is all about the money. In the next breath, you say our deal was better. If it was all about the money and your deal was better, why didn't he take your deal? Again, it's like you listen to this stuff, and initially I had to watch it a couple times because I thought it was satire. I thought it was some sort of, I don't know, some sort of skit. You just listen to that first 30 seconds. He's all about the money. And even if he was, period, yeah, and everyone is. We're all about the money. No one is doing any of this out of the kindness of their heart, including the promoter of this multi-million dollar company who's sitting in front of a sign for a new entity that he's trying to grow, who he touts has these numbers and this social media and does this and that. That's all about the money too. You're trying to sell off a new entity, to create a new entity, to make it into a successful behemoth like the UFC has become out of the kindness of your heart? To give back to the world, to give back to society? Is it charity? No, that too is an endeavor, pardon the pun, that is all about the money. All of this. We live in a capitalistic society. All of this is about the money. And we've heard it from you tens of thousands of times that it's all about the money. It's the prize-fighting business. We continue.
Deal was bigger here if he stayed in the UFC. I think I've told this story a million times. They can deny it all they want. Why the fuck would I lie? What do I care? It doesn't matter to me one way or the other.
By the way, anyone who always like this is a rule of life. Take it to the bank. If someone says, "Why would I lie?" they're lying. That's number one. Go through history. Anyone who says, "Why would I lie?" I don't care. A, they care. B, they're lying. And he says that like with such smugness, like, you know, let me tell you something. Our deal was better. Yeah. Francis told us that when he walked away, the deal was for about $7 million combined, all the fights combined. Do we really think right now that Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and his PFL debut, those 3 fights alone, do we think that they are worth $7 million? Do you really think he fought Tyson Fury and Joshua alone for $7 million? Come on, guys. Like, come on. We're going to sit here like, come on. How was the deal better? Explain to us how the deal was better. Of course, that doesn't happen. Francis has gone through it like 1,000 times, and we will get to some of that in a moment. But do you really believe that? Now, maybe you could say the upside. You could break it down and say, oh, if you beat Jon Jones and you do a rematch this way, pay-per-view, carry the 4, carry the 3. Okay, maybe you could do that type of mental gymnastics. But do you really believe a fight with Turkey behind it against Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, that alone, forget about the PFL debut, which he then later says is a horrendous deal, and they're hoping that he loses so they could get out of the deal. You think that was less than $7 million? Come on, continue.
I was going to cut Francis when he lost 2 in a row. I was going to cut him.
That was after the Derek Lewis?
Yeah. Somebody around here begged me not to do it.
Pause it right there. So now he's going back to 2018. He's going back to July 7, 2018. In case you didn't know, Francis Ngannou fought Stipe Miocic in January of 2018. He lost that fight. He won the first round and then essentially gassed out and was dominated for the next 4 and lost that title fight. He came back in July of 2018, and it was one of the worst fights of all time. Him versus Derek Lewis, both of them hardly threw anything. Francis lost fair and square, but both guys didn't show up, and both guys have said it's a horrendous fight, and there were such high expectations. They always wanted to run it back, but it never worked out. Dana says that he wanted to cut him after that performance in 2018. Now, what do they do with Francis next? So you think, okay, you want to cut this guy because you didn't like the way he fought in that fight, and as he says later, you didn't like his attitude, and some stuff happened. He keeps alluding to these cryptic things that happened, but never tells us what they are. So you would think they'd put him in the doghouse, right? You'd think that they'd put him in the doghouse and they'd bury the guy, put him on the prelims, and not push him, right? Because the boss wants to cut him. Yeah, he refers to 2 people that told him to keep Francis around, but you'd think ultimately they'd bury him, right? His next fight was in November of 2018, 11 months later. It was a headliner in Beijing, China. A bit of a small market, right? I would say tiny. It's kind of like equivalent to Jacksonville or something like that. Beijing, China, headliner against Curtis Blades, a rematch against Curtis Blades. That was his next fight. The fight after that, headliner, Phoenix, Arizona, First event, main card on ESPN. First main card on ESPN. I remember, Chael and I were in Bristol. We did Sports Center right after. Cain Velasquez, Francis Ngannou, and Ngannou wins in 26 seconds. Oh, by the way, he beat Curtis Blades in Beijing 3 months prior in 45 seconds. So you'd think, yeah, you want to cut him. You're speaking so confidently. I wanted to get rid of him. Next fight, main event in Beijing. Next fight, main event of the first ESPN main card in Phoenix, Arizona. Next fight, just a few months later, January of 2019. Main event, Minnesota, fight night on ESPN, knocks out Junior Dos Santos in a minute and 11 seconds. Again, we've seen them bury people. We remember what they did to Andrei Arlovsky back in the day when he wanted to test free agency. They had him fight Jake O'Brien on the non-televised prelims of UFC 70. Like, we've seen this before. Or was it 68? It was 68, in Columbus, Ohio. They ain't burying this guy. You wanted to cut him. You wanted to get rid of him. You thought he was garbage. Main event Beijing, main event ESPN Phoenix, main event Minnesota. The next time Francis fought was on the first show back in the pandemic, May of 2020. That big show, empty arena, Jacksonville. The whole world was watching that. There was literally nothing else going on. Again, Jairzinho Rozenstruik starches him in 20 seconds. You'd think if you want to bury the guy, if you don't want to be in business with him, if you don't believe in him, if you don't think he's worth it, you're not putting him on that card. Certainly not. You're putting him, you're sticking him at the apex maybe a few weeks later when the rest of the world is coming back. You could have literally picked from any fighter on the roster for that card. They all wanted to fight on it. If they could get into the country, you pick Francis. Main card, by the way, pay-per-view, starches Jairzinho. His next fight, title fight against Stipe, and then Ciryl Gane. So this idea that they wanted to cut him is hogwash. And this idea that they were going to bury him or didn't want to be in business with him or wanted to hold him back, hogwash. And even if that was true, we know how the story plays out. We know how this story goes. Would have been one of the worst decisions in the history of fight sports if you would have cut this guy who then beat Curtis Blades in 45 seconds, beat Cain in 26 seconds, beat Junior Dos Santos in 71 seconds, beat Jairzinho Rozenstruik in 20 seconds, beat Stipe Miocic second round, 52 seconds, and then did what he did against Ciryl Gane. That's the rest of his UFC run. How is that something to be proud of? He later addresses that. We'll get to that. We continue.
So it wouldn't have mattered to me one way or the other, you know? There's a much deeper story to this whole thing. And he would have made more money if he stayed in the UFC.
Now he goes back to that misnomer. Pause right there. He goes to the much deeper story thing all the time. He has been doing this for the past couple of years, but he never tells us what the deeper story is, other than the fact that they wanted to sign him and he didn't want to stick around. And now we get to another lie.
That's a fact, my friend. We're moving on.
Okay, so that's not the entire clip. I think we played the wrong one there. You guys know what I'm saying? There's a portion there at the end, which I would love to play because I do want to give Dana White credit. It's very important. But he says Jon Jones, Francis Ngannou, Francis didn't want to fight Jon Jones. That's a fact. Based on what? Based on your opinion or based on history? Because if it's based on history, the facts would suggest it's the complete opposite. That's what the facts would suggest. But he just says these things, and he thinks that the media that he continues to say are a joke, don't exist, are hacks, etc., are just going to eat it up. Not here. You can't do that. Now, I do want to give him credit for what he said right after that. Do we have that portion? There were two clips. There was one short one, one long one. I do want to give him credit for what he said right afterwards because it's very important. It doesn't pertain necessarily to Francis, but I want to give him massive credit for this, just to be as fair and balanced as possible. Here's what he says in continuation, that same clip.
We're moving on. Obviously, everybody loves Tom Aspinall and wants to see Jones and Aspinall or Stipe and Aspinall. And I feel like when Stipe and Jon were young, Jon was 23, youngest champion ever in UFC history, and somebody gave him an opportunity. And I think that Stipe and Jon, whoever wins, should give Aspinall the same opportunity they had.
So all these rumors of, Jon and Stipe both retiring, have you talked to them about that at all? You just hope
I think that both Jon and Stipe will say they're going to retire. because they're going to start negotiating. And whatever the negotiation is, we will get the deal done.
So I want to give him credit for that because, yes, he's right. Someone did give Jon an opportunity. Someone did give Stipe an opportunity. And the winner of that fight needs to give Tom an opportunity. And if they don't, they should be stripped. That's it. And he's right. Everyone does want to see Tom at this point. And the best thing to happen to the UFC in this Francis Ngannou feud is the emergence of Tom Aspinall because he takes a little bit of the pressure away because Tom is supremely popular. He is right. And there is a great demand to see him fight. So everything that he said on the back end, and this is why I wanted to play it, was 1,000% right, in my opinion. Now, it really has nothing to do with Francis, but it was a nice way to end that statement, that answer, with a positive spin and with a bow on top. Dana White continues to say that he doesn't care, that he doesn't think about Francis. I will prove to you that that is not true in a moment. I will prove to you that this is not true. And I will prove to you that everything that he said in that clip prior to the Aspinall part is not exactly comme ci, comme ça, la vérité, as they say in France, the truth. But we continue. The very next day, Francis Ngannou is on SiriusXM Radio, Fight Nation, and he's speaking to the hosts over there. I believe one of them was Ryan McKinnell. It's possible the other was Dean Thomas. I apologize if I'm not getting the host right. The show's called MMA Today, and he was fired up. Here's what Francis Ngannou had to say.
I think Dana is trying to make things up to buy a good face in the position that he have lost. Dana have lost this in this situation, and the only thing is that he can't understand it. Bro, I won everything. I left. We get apart. It's been almost 2 years, and the guy is still out there. He can't live without it. He can handle me. Regardless of everything that happened, I'm not about him. I went out there, did a fight, have a great fight for my son memory, but the guy can't stand. I don't know what is his problem, man. But
pause it right there. That is a very important thing. The story going into this fight for Francis Ngannou was how is he dealing with everything that happened to his family and, of course, to his son. To have this stance, just take the Thursday stance, to have that stance after what happened to Francis Ngannou and what he's been dealing with, and then to have the stance that he had on Saturday, and we'll get to that in a moment as well, that's the part that kind of blows me away. And God bless Francis Ngannou for seemingly taking the high road. This guy just lost his son. And as he's about to say, what is wrong with just saying, God bless, he doesn't work here anymore, I don't care. Why the need to make up these lies? Why the need to spin this narrative? Why the need to call him a bad guy? Because he didn't sign with you guys? Now, the UFC has had the luck of every time they make a decision, it seems to go their way. I remember when Dan Henderson wanted UFC 100 and said, thanks, but no thanks, and then went to fight for Strikeforce, and he lost to Jake Shields. And yes, you will be surprised to know, if you're new to this game, that at one time, Jake Shields was a great MMA fighter. He wasn't just an out-of-his-mind anti-Semite who rages about conspiracy theories online. He was actually a tremendous MMA fighter, and he beat Dan Henderson, and he completely, rained on that parade of Dan Henderson leaving the UFC and going to sign with Strikeforce. It worked out. Dana White was happy about it. They tried to sign Fedor. He loses. He's happy about it. It just seemed like every time they made a move, the ensuing move worked in their favor. This is one of the few times in history where it did not work in their favor, where the guy bet on himself, said thanks but no thanks, and is thriving. The Fury fight, getting the Joshua fight from a monetary standpoint, and then, of course, what happened 2 Saturdays ago against PFL. So he's right. It does seem to bother him because this is one of those cases where it didn't come up UFC. But then when he mentions his son, you think to yourself, man, how could, just say, God bless. I've mentioned Mark Cuban in the past. When Jalen Brunson decided not to sign with the Mavericks, you didn't see Mark Cuban, and this has happened 1,000 times in sports, you don't see the owner say, that guy's X, Y, and Z. You say, all right, it didn't work out, God bless. Mark Cuban is an example I've talked about over the summer. Mark Cuban was on Jalen Brunson's podcast, just chopping it up. What's wrong with just saying, God bless, it didn't work out? Why the need to bury this guy, slander his name, smear his name, just because he didn't sign with you guys, just because he chose to walk away? We continue.
And he can make everything up as he want. That's his problem. I think he needs to make a peace with himself. You could have just said we didn't find a agreement or something. We couldn't find we couldn't come to a deal. But good luck to him. That's it. Good for him. And and we continue our life. What's the problem here? But I think the problem is that he can handle this loss. Basically, like he been praying for I'm sure he's been praying for my downfall, and then I'm just keep doing my thing, rising. Since I left the UFC, in any senses, I'm more than what I was. And which money he's talking about?
Pause it right there. He's 100% right, by the way. If you think for a second that he is not praying for his downfall, you're kidding yourself. I mean, take it from me. Take it from me, where he was able to throw roadblock after roadblock after roadblock in my way and try to change the course of my life. That's the kind of person that he is. So take it from me, he's 1,000%. Now, he can't do that over there. When I was at ESPN, he could, because I was in the same playpen as their world. So that's exactly the kind of person that he is, and he has told us in the past that that's the kind of person that he is. So yes, he is praying for his downfall, and yes, it's not working out, and here you are. You get these types of responses. We continue.
Money that he owes me, because let me tell you, remember, all this ended with like, they say, oh, we're going to back pay you from the money that we owe you from the Stipe and Senegal fight. All that, they never back pay me.
Pause it right there. This is where it gets complicated in the next clip, and you'll see he's explained this to us. He said in the negotiations, we are going to back pay you because you fought Ciryl Gane for $600,000. You fought Stipe for less than that. And so we're going to make it right. That's what he's referring to here. He's referring to, in the negotiations, they admitted that he didn't get what he was deserving of. And they tried to sign him to a new deal before the Stipe fight. They tried to sign him to a new deal before the Gane fight. He said no to both because he wanted to bet on himself and test free agency. So what he's saying here is, they admitted to me that I wasn't getting what I was deserving, what I was owed. And so he's talking about, now the money and whatnot. He's saying, okay, you guys admitted it to me. You want to talk about money? Like, you admitted that you owe me back pay. Of course, that's never going to happen. He's not saying that they owe him money from the deals. He's referring to the negotiations, and Dana knows exactly what he's referring to. He's referring to the negotiations where they said, we're going to make it right. Yes, you were underpaid against Stipe. Yes, you were underpaid against Ciryl Gane. We're going to make it right in this new deal. The new deal never came. No chance to make it right. Remember that. It comes up in a bit. We continue.
Made more money than I would have ever made in the UFC. I would say maybe twice the money that I could have ever made in my entire UFC career if I had continued in the UFC.
Pause right there. And again, important to note, he is saying more money in the last couple fights outside of the UFC than his entire UFC career times 2. He's not saying in the fights post-Gane. He's saying entire UFC times 2 the last 3 fights. Think about that. We continue.
From the moment that I stopped.
Right.
I don't know. But either way, if I have made less money, if I'm not making less money, enough money that I could have made in the UFC, that would be my problem. Why is it so pissed about me not making that much money? Like, come on, man. Live your life.
Live your life. All he had to say on that Thursday was, didn't watch it, waste of time, B-Leagues, God bless. Or even, God bless. Or even, God forbid, hey, the guy's been through a lot. We did business. God bless. Because I don't remember a lot of slinging dirt. That press conference in 2023, in January of 2023, when Dana said goodbye. Remember, Francis came on our show. There wasn't a lot of slinging dirt. Like, there hasn't been a lot of insults, right? So he could have just said, God bless, all the best. That didn't happen. And so Francis Ngannou says that on Friday. Saturday night, after the Abu Dhabi show, after 308, Dana White is asked about what Francis said on Friday. Now, he is asked by Mike Bond of MMA Junkie, and part of that first answer is Mike reciting the quote from Francis. But as you will recall, I just explained to you what the back pay is all about. Look at where Dana takes that back pay comment.
And another thing you mentioned at Power Slap the other night was stuff about Francis Ngannou, and that stirred up a lot of reaction from the MMA community and from Francis himself. And he had a very interesting quote. Can I read you a little bit? He said, he can't handle this loss, referring to you. I'm sure he's been praying for my downfall. Which money is he talking about? The money that he owes me. They say we're going to give you back pay from the money we owe you from the Stipe and Ciryl Gane fights. All that, they never paid me back. Now I've made more money than I would have ever made in the UFC. I would say twice the money in my entire UFC career.
Yeah. When have you ever heard a story in all the years we've been in business, even when it was upside down, where we owed somebody money? Never happened. So he's full of shit there.
Pause right there. So you see what I mean? He is interpreting that as you didn't pay my salary, you didn't pay my purse, you didn't pay what you said you were going to pay me. That's not what Francis was saying, and he would know because he was part of the negotiation. I know Hunter Campbell is the main one doing the negotiation, but when it's something as top level as re-signing Francis Ngannou, he's a part of it. And and again, what Francis was referring to was the revelation, admitting to the fact that, hey, we know you didn't get paid what you were owed against Stipe and Gane. This deal is going to serve as somewhat of a back pay, right? He's not saying you didn't pay me for those fights. It's a back pay. Dana takes it in a completely different direction to make him seem like an asshole, quite simply. We continue.
Then I lost. I didn't lose anything. I was done with Francis after the... He actually owes me money because we had to watch that fight with him and the Black Beast. He should actually pay me back for that fight.
Pause right there. I'll give him credit. I'll give him credit. Good zinger. Good zinger. It was a bad fight. He's 100% right. And I will also say he is correct in this regard. The UFC is doing just fine. Make no mistake about it. That's what makes it so crazy. The UFC is on fire. The UFC is about to score a massive, massive TV deal next year. They are doing just fine. No one is bigger than the UFC, and that includes Conor McGregor. No one is bigger than the UFC. They are doing just fine. That's what is so crazy about all this. He can't help himself. And yes, of course, I know he's not going out there and willingly, talking about these things. He's being asked about them. I will say, though, there are instances, especially in the last couple of days, where it's very clearly he's telling the media to tee him up on questions. Like the PFL power slap thing was 1,000% a tee up. Trust me, from someone who's been there before, I know exactly. When he's got the paper there with the stats, that was teed up. He's not just walking around with stats. Francis, I don't believe that's the case. He'd probably rather not talk about him. And he's probably right. He's not sitting at home saying like, oh my God, Francis, I've lost. He's 1,000% right. But all the other shit is a complete fabrication. We continue.
You. And me praying for it, trust me, I don't think about Francis that much. You guys asked me the question about the PFL, and I responded. Other than that, the only one who's praying for his demise is probably the PFL, because they signed a shitty contract with a guy that doesn't deliver any numbers in ticket sales or pay-per-views. And they got to keep paying this guy for however long, and good for him, and not good for them.
Yeah, and I know
what was the other question?
It was. I know you said like he's all about the money, but then you also said like he would have made more money to stay here.
And that's a fact. He can play those games all he wants. He would have made more money here.
How is that a fact?
Let me tell you what. There were two guys here. I wanted to cut them. Someday I'll tell you the story.
Again with this.
Francis was like, I was all about Francis in the beginning, and then I found out who Francis was, and I told the two guys who asked me not to cut Francis, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
So pause it right there.
And
pause it right there. When the story is, and Francis has talked about it because I've asked him about it in the past. Apparently, the story was when he was about to fight Stipe, Francis said something like, get the jet ready for me. That's as far as we've gone, as far as something that kind of didn't sit well with Dana, right? That's as far, and this has been discussed. This is a story. Yes, there are interviews where Dana says, like, after the Stipe fight, I was mad at him. After the Derek fight, I was mad at him. Never says cut. Now we get to this revelation. But Dana says he showed us his true colors. Okay, so what? Was it that? Was that the true colors? In a business where you've got the cockiest guys, sometimes criminals, people who, beat their wife, people who do really bad things. Like, this is the guy who showed you his true colors. He was saying, get the jet ready for me. And then of course, and I'm not going to go too far deep into this, but like to have someone like him sit up there and say, like, when someone shows you their true colors, believe them. I mean, the irony is just, it's dripping. It's somewhat mind-blowing to sit up there and speak like this about a different human being. That irony continues in a second.
Yeah. Believe me, I have no sleepless nights over Francis leaving.
I believe that.
So just two more things on this.
Yep.
You wanted to cut him, but he went on to become the UFC heavyweight champion. So I guess what does that say about that thought process? Does it show he should have stayed?
Well, no. I didn't like Francis as a person. Wasn't a guy I wanted to do business with. My boys were telling me he's misunderstood. And I told them, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Yeah, it wasn't about him becoming the heavyweight champion of the world. Francis isn't a good guy. He plays the good guy. I don't understand the language, and so he seems like he's a nice guy.
Pause right there.
He's not.
Francis plays a good guy. He's not a good guy. And then the I don't understand the language. Like that one, I think went over everyone's head. I mean, how that is not just deemed offensive is beyond me. But fair, has Francis ever on this show played the I don't understand what you're saying card? Maybe behind closed doors he's done that. But I mean, the fact that this isn't even his first language and he speaks about business as eloquently as he does is somewhat mind-blowing. He's not a good guy. When you consider the people that the UFC has done business with, continues to do business with, will do business with, and the non-issues that they have with those human beings, and Francis isn't the good guy because he didn't sign their deal, because he said, get the jet ready for me. Unless there's some other issue out there, and please let us know. Educate us. Tell us right now. And I'll say, okay, I didn't know that happened. But I mean, we've been talking about this particular story since 2018, this particular incident. Francis isn't the good guy. And he wanted to cut him because he wasn't a good guy. But look at the roster. Today, yesterday, 5 years ago. We could point out a lot of people with checkered histories and past and resumes who I would say are a little bit worse guys than Francis. And they have no problem giving those people fights. But Francis isn't a good guy. This is where we've arrived. Now he's a bad guy. Now he's a bad human being because he didn't take their deal. Incredible. We continue.
And he's just not a guy that I wanted to be in business with. Period. Yeah. End of story. Whether he became the champion or not.
And I assume you don't want to be in business with him ever again, but...
We won't be. We'll never be in business together. You can tell.
Yeah.
We don't like each other. And this goes way back. This goes back to before the first Stipe fight. He pulled some shit before the first Stipe fight, and I said, I'm done with this guy. And then Stipe beat the shit out of him. Great night. And then, we never had a relationship after that.
Well, I know you said Jon Jones would walk out of any room, so wouldn't it be gratifying to put him in a room with Francis?
He didn't want that fight. He could have stayed and took that fight. He didn't want that fight. Tom Aspinall deserves that fight.
So he says that Francis Ngannou didn't want that fight. We have debunked this. We will debunk it again. He said that he pulled some shit and he wanted nothing to do with him. Here's what I can say is true about that. There are multiple interviews afterwards where I asked Francis, have you and Dana spoken? Have you guys cleared the air? And he continued to say no. But the idea that the UFC and as a company wanted nothing to do with him, and even that Dana was done with him, is not true. Maybe privately they never got on the phone, but as you'll see in a moment, not the case. And so let us go into the time machine and let us go back to December of 2018, right before that fight against Stipe, that fight where all this really starts. Francis is coming off a knockout of Alistair Overeem. His head almost flies off in Detroit, Michigan. He comes back a month and a half later to fight Stipe for the belt in Boston. Remember, he takes that fight on supremely short notice, his first title defense. The Overeem fight was in early December. The title fight was in mid-January. Supremely fast. He takes the fight. At the pre-fight press conference, this is how Dana White is speaking of Francis Ngannou.
Francis Ngannou has the world record for the most powerful punch. His punch is the equivalent to 96 horsepower, which is equal to getting hit by a Ford Escort going as fast as it can. And it's more powerful than a 12-pound sledgehammer swung full force from overhead. Holy shit.
It's amazing going back to those clips because if you recall, or maybe you don't know because you're a newer fan, The whole narrative going into that fight was how they were disrespecting Stipe. Stipe ended up winning the fight. Stipe took the belt from Dana and gave it to his coach to put around his waist because he was so mad about the way he was being disrespected, about his pay, about the way they were hyping up Francis. There are tons of interviews. Just go in there and look up UFC 220 Stipe with myself and others where Stipe is clearly seething before the fight and after the fight. Francis loses the fight. And then he comes back and he loses to Derek Lewis. Somewhere along the lines, things got so bad that we find out 6 years later that Dana White wanted to cut him. It was that bad. He wanted to cut him. Of course, as I've just told you, he then headlined Beijing and ESPN and Minnesota and the Jacksonville COVID card and fought for the belt. So, they wanted to cut him. Like, why are they giving him all these opportunities? All right, let's go to May of 2020 now. Now this is right around the time that all this is popping off. He has just beaten Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and all of a sudden, May of 2020, April of 2020 was all about Gaethje and Khabib. May of 2020 was all about Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. And everyone believed Francis was the guy, and everyone believed it would be a huge fight, and everyone believed that Jon Jones wanted nothing to do with the fight. I didn't believe that. It just, he had just fought Dominic Reyes, and they didn't want to pay him what he was owed. How do I know that? Well, you're about to find out. Here's me talking to Francis Ngannou in May of 2020, and here's Francis backing Jon Jones in his stance to be paid what he is asking for and what the UFC doesn't want to pay him for this mega fight.
I think he asked for something which is reasonable. And then, I don't know how much that was, but I think he asked for something reasonable.
Reasonable.
People said Jones, he doesn't want to fight me. I think he wants.
Backing him.
Because he makes himself clear. And he wants money. He tells the UFC he wants money. He tells everyone that he wants money. And we know all what guy can do with money, for money. So, and once again, it's not like a middleweight or welterweight. Jon Jones is a light heavyweight. He walk around as a heavyweight. He has to cut weight to go to heavyweight, to light heavyweight. So, and he's been around. He's a world-class champion. He's been in the top for a long time. He has this experience. So I think he won the fight. I mean, I believe that.
See how he's backing Jon? See how he's backing his desire to fight him? See how he's backing his desire to get paid more? Bad guy Francis. And you'll see from that minute clip, the whole narrative in May of 2020 was Jon doesn't want to fight Francis. Not the opposite. Not the Francis was scared. Francis looked for the easy fight. That whole narrative that you hear now wasn't a thing when it was actually happening. What do you believe more? What people were saying in the moment or what they're trying to say 4 years later after a divorce? Come on now. We'll move along and we go to May of 2020. Same month.
Jones and I have always had
Here's
this,
Dana White. Pause it for a second. If you could just replay it. Here's Dana White talking about Jon Jones, and it's important to listen to this. When you hear the way he talks about Jon Jones now, listen to how he was talking about Jon Jones back in May of 2020. Go ahead.
Jon Jones and I have always had this, I'm always looking at what Jon Jones could have been, He could have been the LeBron of the sport. He could have been literally that big. The stuff that he's been through to show up and think he, basically demand $15 million or $20 million or $30 million. It's crazy.
So 2 things to note here. Again, the whole thing was about Jon not wanting to fight Francis, not the opposite. It was never brought up that Francis was the problem here. A. B. You know how many times Jon Jones has won? Forget won. You know how many times Jon Jones has fought since that comment? Once. The Ciryl Gane fight. That's it. But yet you hear the way he talks about him now, greatest ever. All that is to stick it to Francis. Greatest ever, that's just to stick it to him. He's fought once against Ciryl Gane, a fight that lasted 2 minutes. Supremely impressive, incredible fight. But your stance changed so much on the guy. Could have been LeBron. Now he's like the greatest thing since sliced bread. They've never promoted him in a more positive light. But again, more importantly, everyone was talking about Jon being the issue, not Francis. I'm not saying Jon was the issue. I think he deserved 20, 30 million. Make no mistake about it. But it's just important to note, it was never brought up that Francis was a part of the problem. It is now, not back then. We fast forward, March of 2021, Francis Ngannou just beats Stipe Miocic to become the heavyweight champion. He's doing an interview with Joe Rogan. He is asked of Jon Jones. Here's what he says.
I want you to enjoy this, and I want you to celebrate this victory, but I also want to talk to you about the future. Jon Jones sent a tweet out. It said, "Let's play, baby." What do you think about a potential? Oh, another one was Show Me the Money. What do you think about a potential fight with one of the greatest, if not the greatest, mixed martial arts fighters in the history of the sport, Jon Jones, now moving up to heavyweight? That will be your first title defense.
Absolutely. I mean, for my opinion, Jon Jones is the greatest of all the time for mixed martial art.
No, that ends too soon. There's more to that clip if we can get it. He talks about, and it's very important if we could get that full clip. He talks about his desire to fight Jon Jones, and he talks about his idea that, like, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go in July. I'm ready to go in August. I'm ready to go, the next pay-per-view. Like, never does he says, show me the money for Jon. Never does he say, like, I don't know about that. Like, look at his response. He just beat Stipe Miocic, and he's ready to go. You never hear that. Now, of course, people say things in interviews, and maybe behind the scenes it's different. I get that. I acknowledge that. But you never see any kind of hesitation. You never see any kind of public negotiation. You never see him or hear him say, nah. They've got to show me the money too. Do we have that full clip or no? We don't have that. I think it's important to play that. Do I have to play it off my phone? What happened to it? One second. I'm going to play this off my phone because I want everything to be seen and heard from.
Greatest of all the time for mixed martial art. And him moving up is going to be a good thing. It's a challenge that I will take and put it on my record. Would be a very good challenge for me, very good thing on my resume. But for this time, he's going to be the challenger. I am the champ. He's coming up and looking for me. So I'm ready anytime soon. Even summer, I'll be here, ready to fight in July or August, whenever. They are ready, I'm ready. He said something like, show the money, and we go, baby. I'm here.
Francis, that will be one of the...
Show the money. He's talking about him. That's my interpretation. July, August, I'm ready to go. Never, hey, we got to negotiate. We got to get a new deal. I don't want him, this or that. You tell me your interpretation. That same night, post-fight press conference, this is Dana White, who tells us now 3 years later he wanted to cut him, who he wasn't all about Francis. He wasn't a fan of his. Didn't want to be in business with him. This is his immediate reaction to what Francis did to Stipe.
Dana, new heavyweight champion of the world. Pretty impressive stuff from Francis Ngannou. I mean, I think everybody's still soaking it in, but give us your initial reaction to that.
Yeah, no, he looked damn good. He looked incredible, man. And obviously you saw a lot of things from him tonight that we hadn't seen from him in the past. Head kicks, leg kicks, really good grappling. Takedown defense, scary.
Yeah, look at that grin. A promoter's dream. He should feel that way because you've just got a guy who's, chiseled out of stone, who's a freaking comic book character as your heavyweight champion. You should feel that way. And if you're wondering, did anyone ask him about the Jon Jones fight? Can we confirm whether or not it was Francis the issue or Jon Jones being the issue? Here's what he said when asked about Jon Jones fighting Francis moments after that win.
The idea of a Jon Jones fight seems awfully exciting right now. And Jon came out, tweeted, said, show me the money. What appeals to you most? Because it seems like that would be an amazing super fight.
If I'm Jon Jones and I'm home watching this fight, I start moving to 85.
You think that's a fight that you'd like to put together next? I mean, I know we don't matchmake, but that sure does seem exciting.
Listen, I could sit here all day and tell you, what show me the money mean? I tell you guys this all the time. If you can say you want to fight somebody, but do you really want to?
Insinuating that the greatest of all time, now the greatest fighter of all time, as he continuously says, is scared of fighting Francis Ngannou or doesn't want to fight Francis Ngannou. We'll leave it at that. That's all you need right there. That's the only clip in this whole thing. In the immediate aftermath, He says, Jon's talking nonsense about this show me the money. He doesn't want the fight. And if I were him, I'd move to 185. That's all you need. And I'd love for someone to ask him that question. That's it. That night, Jon Jones is tweeting through it. Look how mad he was. Look how many tweets. Shout out to Andrew Feldman. Go to 185. He's responding to that. The answer is yes, I want to get paid. If you're wondering if I want this fight. People are saying I'm afraid. Everything. Afraid. The whole thing. What an insult. Why does a fighter have to be afraid the second he asks for money? Conor McGregor wants big money. It's expected. Jon Jones? No, he's afraid. Look how many tweets. Look how he's rolling through it. This is all on the same night. Look at the timestamps. We're now at 2:56 a.m. Derek Lewis being used as a negotiation. Look how many tweets. Look how upset he was. We're now at 3:09 a.m. 11 a.m. This is how mad he was. There was nothing being suggested that Francis Ngannou was the problem. It was all about Jon.
Because you would be afraid to fight Francis doesn't mean I would be afraid to fight Francis. You're probably not like me. Remember that.
After Francis's win, I had him on the show and I asked him, hey, all the talk is about Jon wanting to get paid, Jon wanting more money. What about you? Don't you want more money? Here's what he said.
And I'm just curious because a lot has been said about him wanting to get paid more and all this stuff. But what about you, Francis? You're the champ now. Like, is it just a matter of, all right, Francis, here's your next fight, or are there talks that need to happen for you because you're the champ now?
Well, I want to get paid more, obviously, if that's the question. I think everybody wants to pay more. I want a good term for that fight. I want it to be in a good term, in my favor, or at least with more benefit. But listen, I'm in the contract. I have to fight,
Pause it right there.
I don't want to...
Listen, I'm in a contract. I have to fight. Of course I want to get paid more. We all want to get paid more. Andy wants to get paid more. GC wants to get paid more. Eric wants to get paid more. I want to get paid more.
Who,
Jordan,
me?
Frank is thrilled with his pay, I'm told. Everyone wants to get paid more. But what does he say right there? Listen, I'm in a contract. And he continues.
I think the best is to come. My future is just there. I have a big space to take everything that I want.
A big staple of those pandemic interviews was his fire alarm. It kept beeping. It was incredible. Does that sound like a guy who's holding out, who's playing games, who's afraid, who's trying to negotiate, who's looking for a way out? Of course I want to get paid more. Everyone's talking about him getting paid. Of course I want to get paid more. But I have a contract, and if they offer me this fight, does it sound like a guy who's going to put a roadblock up? Of course, he doesn't fight Jon Jones next. He fights Ciryl Gane. Bum knee. They try to sign him multiple times before the Stipe fight, before that interview, and then leading up to the last fight on his deal against Ciryl Gane. January of 2022, all the marbles, Anaheim, pawned. You win the fight, you're the champ as a free agent. You lose the fight, you lose all your leverage, all your momentum. They flick you off to the side. They kick you to the curb. Torn ACL, they tell him, don't do it. He does it, down 2-0, turns it around. He becomes Cael Sanderson, and he wins 3-2. Dana White doesn't put the belt around his waist, says afterwards, I had to go deal with something in the back. Maybe someone else was getting banned. Mick Maynard puts it around his waist, and then he rides off into the sunset. This is what Francis Ngannou said to me after the fight when I asked him, what do you want? Do you want more money? Are you being a nuisance? Do you want to what do you want ultimately? What would make you happy? This is what he said.
So does that mean when you say freedom, does that mean you want to be free, that you don't want to fight for the UFC anymore?
You can be free and fight for the UFC.
How?
I just want to be free.
How can you be free and fight for the UFC, in your opinion?
I mean, we are supposedly an independent contractor. Mm-hmm. Independent contractor technically is a free person.
Sure. But you know how it is, right? The contracts are very restrictive, right? You can't go box. You can't do this.
And that's the reason why they need some adjustment in that contract. That's what I've been fighting for.
So when you say it's not just about the money, you said that, right? It's not just about...
Could you say to the world, what do you want? What is it about then? Freedom is, but like, what are you looking for? Is there anything specific that you can share? I know you don't have to go through your whole entire life goal here, but what is it that's really bugging you about what they're offering and what maybe they're not offering?
The term of the contract, everything that they put into, they hold you like in captivity. Like you can't do anything. You have no right. The contract is one-sided. Although you still don't have nothing, you don't even have a health insurance while you're doing this, putting your body on the line to put on the show, risking everything. There's a lot of things, man. We have no insurance, nothing, like no guarantee.
Does that sound like someone who's all about the money? Does that sound like someone who's afraid? Does that sound like someone who's a bad guy? Does that sound like someone who, was looking for a way out? No, that sounds like someone, by the way, does that sound like someone who's dumb? Does that sound like someone who doesn't understand the language? Or does it sound like someone who reads contracts, understands labor laws, understands independent contractor status versus employee status, understands freedoms and lack thereof, understands insurance or lack thereof, understands the ability to bet on yourself and live one life? Well, what does it sound like to you? You tell me. I'm offering this to you. What does it sound like to you? Does it sound like the guy who's all about the money? When you hear that, does that sound like that guy to you? Doesn't sound like that to me. We continue. March of 2022, 2 months later, Dana White speaking to Michael Eaves of ESPN. This is 2 months later, talking about the guy that he didn't want to be in business with, that he didn't want to have around, that he wanted to cut in 2018, 4 years later now. This is 2 months after Francis's last fight. Here's what Dana White says about his interest in re-signing Francis Ngannou.
Any progress made in that regard?
He's been in Cameroon visiting his family, so he's supposed to get back here in the next couple of weeks, and we're supposed to get together. And
from your standpoint, do you need to? Would you like to get it soon rather than later, or does it matter?
Listen, in the history of this company, the only guy that we've ever not signed was Fedor.
Okay.
I mean, it's the only guy we could never sign. So, I'm hopeful and confident that we can get a deal done with Francis.
And you're not worried about it, whether it's next week or 8 months from now?
Yeah, no, as long as we get it done.
All right, fair enough.
As long as we get it done. Hopeful and confident. Does that sound like someone that they wanted to just disregard? Does that sound like someone they didn't want to be in business with? That's 2 months later. That's now 2 months into his exclusive negotiation period. Does that sound like someone who was happy he was out of the Francis Ngannou business? If you wanted to cut him, you'd think they would let him go. You'd think they'd let him go. You'd think they wouldn't keep him around for that whole year. His last fight against Gane was in January of 2022. His next fight was in January of 2023 because there was a whole year negotiation period because he was champion. A whole freaking year. And then they tried to sign him multiple times leading up to that, and then he comes out with the press conference saying, we've released him. You didn't release him. The clock expired. Does that sound like someone that they did not want to be in business with? And they say he's all about the money, but he left, and they say that there's a better deal on the table. And Dana White also said, I don't care about Francis. I don't lose sleep. Doesn't bother me one bit. I could care less. It should be couldn't care less. You tell me if they are bothered by his success. This is August of 2024. Israel Adesanya is about to fight Dricus du Plessis. He talks about Dricus a few months prior at the on-sale press conference. They then put it together for a countdown. Look, shout out to Andrew Feldman who caught this. Look at how they scrub Francis Ngannou's name from his answer. Look at this.
To be a bit of tension between yourself and Dricus. Can
This
you
is
just
the
run
countdown.
through why that is?
There's always tension whenever you fight anyone. This is a fight at the end of the day. We're not playing chess, we're fighting. So there's always gonna be tension there. But then him discrediting me, Kamaru Usman, he came in the UFC, I knew who he was a little bit, but I didn't go, oh, who the f is this fake dude coming in? I just said, cool, there's another African in the UFC. That ticked me off a little bit. So that's what started this. But again, I'll finish it.
That's what they aired.
And also again,
this is what he really said.
He tried to discredit the Three Kings and say that he's the real true African champion. And I was just like, it's a weird mindset, bro. Like, he came in the UFC. I knew who he was a little bit, but I didn't go, oh, who the fuck's this fake dude coming in? I just said, cool, he's another African in the UFC. But then him discrediting me, Francis Ngannou, Kamaru Usman, that ticked me off a little bit. So that's what started this. But again, I'll finish it.
They literally edited his name out of the answer. Edited his name. Izzy was bothered. Dana White was asked about it at a press conference. You know, feigned ignorance, said, oh, I have no idea. Oh, Lene, do you know anything? Oh, Chris, do you know anything? He does that whole bit, calls up Kevin Iole, says, no, my troops were, being good soldiers. And let's take him at his word. Let's believe that there was an editor or producer out there who said, oh, no, we can't show anything about Francis Ngannou, right? We can't do that. He's persona non grata. I know what that feels like. Trust me. Let's do that. Let's scrub his name out, even though it's quite obvious that when you talk about the three kings, you're talking about Izzy, Kamaru, and Francis. Let's scrub him out. Let's just, Let's just say, it was a mistake. It was an honest mistake. The producer went into business for himself. The editor tried to, score some brownie points. He went into business for himself or herself. Who knows? The problem is, almost exactly a year prior, Kamaru Usman, before the Khamzat Chimaev fight on Embedded, is wearing a Francis Ngannou t-shirt, October of 2023. He's now long gone. Why is that t-shirt scrubbed out? Why is it blurred out? Hey, bro, Usman, that's a nice shirt you have there, but I can't see what is in front. Oh, if you're wondering, it's that shirt. Ngannou, Cameroon, Africa, courtesy of our friends over at Roots of Fight. Oh, surely that's a mistake. Surely the countdown edit was a mistake. If it was such a mistake, why are they scrubbing people's t-shirts? Why are they blurring out? Like, come on, this is next level pettiness. Because he walked away. Because he said thanks, but no thanks. You guys are winning. You're the big behemoths. You're the number one organization in combat sports. No one went in to business for themselves. Those are the marching orders. And oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, when Tafan Nkuchi is fighting, Nchikwi, I screwed that up, only Cameroonian fighter in UFC history, remember that? You might say to yourself, damn, that's a shot at Francis. He was from Cameroon. Actually, it's a shot at Francis and Ramo Thierry Sokoju, the legend. Francis noting that Thierry Sokoju was the first Cameroonian in the UFC. I was second. Don't let them lie and erase history. That's 2 months prior. That's 2 months prior to the Usman thing and a full year prior to the countdown thing. This is not deliberate. Excuse me. This isn't a coincidence. It is very deliberate. It is extremely deliberate. No way is this a coincidence. They are trying to scrub him. They are trying to paint this new narrative, this new story that he's all about the money, that he was afraid, that he's a bad guy. And it's hard to watch. And it's uncomfortable to watch because all of this could be eliminated with one statement. We're not in the Francis business. We wish him well in his future endeavors. Goodbye. And ultimately, what kicked all of this off was the first comment that he was all about the money, right? That's what kicked this all off back on Thursday. And they've gone back and forth, and there was stuff about the pay, and we asked him about the pay and all, but that's what really ignited this latest chapter. All about the money. And remember what I said about being a prize fighter? Remember what I said? How could you knock anyone, even if that is their sole intention, to make as much money as possible? How can you knock anyone, even if they come from the best background possible? You're going in there with 4-ounce gloves to punch another man. Of course you should be all about the money. Of course. Let alone someone who is from Cameroon, who grew up in a hut with no electricity, with no running water, who wore, he told us recently, he wore the same pair of shoes for years and years, who used the same toothbrush for 11 straight years. The same toothbrush. That's how poor he was. Escaped. Slept in a parking garage. Of course that guy should be all about the money. But why does he have that mentality? Why does he have that thought process? Why should he be all about the money? Why is he right to be all about the money? It's because the man that he is feuding with, the president of the UFC, is the one who tells fighters to be all about the money. For all intents and purposes. What does Dana White always say? This isn't a career, it's an opportunity. You've heard him say this, right? Put that in YouTube. Put Dana White career, not opportunity, and see how many different clips come up. This is a career, not an opportunity. Excuse me. This is an opportunity, not a career. Did I screw that up? I've been talking for a long time. This is an opportunity, not a career. This is an opportunity, not a career. A career is something. Oh, it's a long race. It's a marathon. No. He's saying this is a sprint. Get yours, get in, and get out, because you rarely come out unscathed. Not sound familiar? Let's go back to 2020. Let's go to June of 2020. Let's go to Dana White talking about opportunities and careers.
You know, when you're a professional athlete, you have a very small window of opportunity, a very limited amount of time. You know, we get into all this money shit and the stuff that's going on right now. Everybody acts like this is a fucking career. This isn't a career. This is not a career. This is an opportunity. Anything can happen at any given moment. Knee can blow out. You're back. You're this. You're that. COVID-19. You know, who the hell knows what is coming down the pipeline? So you have to take every opportunity that you can get.
Knee could blow out like it did for Francis. COVID-19 like it derailed Khamzat Chimaev's career. Take every opportunity. He's telling you right there, fighters, take every opportunity. Get yours. Be greedy. Obviously, you have to work within reason. But if you have that mentality, and if you told us time and again, this is an opportunity, not a career, meaning an opportunity for me is a very, very, very small window, a short-lived time frame, not a career that lasts 20, 30 years. And he's right. He's absolutely right. I agree with that mentality. Every fighter should have that mentality. How could you shit on a guy for trying to improve his life, trying to improve his family's life, trying to get the freedom that he so wanted, trying to go out there and live a dream in his late 30s to box? That was where this all started. He wanted to be a boxer first. Trying to grow something like PFL Africa to give other fighters from his country an opportunity. Where's the bad guy? How could you sit there and shit on this guy and attempt to smear his name and attempt to make him out to make him out to be the bad guy, the enemy here, the greedy, scared, didn't want to risk his pristine record. And we could go through that whole thing all over again. We did it once. It's on YouTube. Enjoy yourself. The idea that he wanted, he wanted easy fights, that he didn't want to. He didn't want to like risk his record. He didn't want to take chances. He goes out there and fights the #1 heavyweight in the world, and then he goes out there and fights Anthony Joshua. That sound like a guy that didn't want to take chances? That sound like a guy that didn't want to take risks? The whole thing is ludicrous. The whole thing gives me a headache. I say, Lord have mercy. End all of this. I don't know if he can help himself, because going back to Francis's point, in this particular battle, not the Great War, but in the battle of, okay, I say no to you multiple times, I'm going to go out there and live my best life, Francis wins quite easily. He wins in the personal battle, not in the war of UFC versus Francis. Of course, the UFC comes out on top. Even Dana White's life, he's doing just fine. They're all doing just fine. Why can't you just be happy for the guy? Or at the very least, just say, God bless. I'll never understand it. We're all wired differently. But I hope in the last hour or so, I've explained to you why when I saw that first clip on Thursday, I had to watch it a few times, because I couldn't believe all the bullshit being spewed. I couldn't believe all the nonsense. Is this the end? Is this the last chapter? Probably not. But I hope you now understand who's telling the truth and who isn't. Thanks for watching this video. Hey, before you go, do me a favor, hit that sub button, give us a thumbs up, hit the little bell thingy as well, leave us a nice comment or two. We appreciate you all very much.